Welcome to the Midlife Mom Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Lewis. I'm a coach for midlife moms with a background as a mental health therapist. I help midlife moms who are feeling lost and stuck to be able to discover and create their dream midlife. Let's do this. Hello, midlife moms. Welcome back to the podcast. I am feeling super bummed out right now because the other day I recorded this podcast and I was going to get it uploaded and I realized that was gone. So I'm super bummed, and I guess it has its reasons, or maybe there's no reason at all and I just need to learn something about finishing when I start something and getting things saved. That might be the lesson for me. So we'll see how this goes. I don't know if this one will end up being a little bit shorter because of time than the other one was, but who knows? Maybe this one will be even better. I decided to do a podcast related to redirecting anxious thoughts because of a recent experience that I had. So I'll go ahead and I'll share the experience with you and hopefully be able to tie that together with some takeaways or ways that you can apply what I'm sharing today. So I shared in a couple of more recent podcasts how we were getting our youngest off to college. And when we were driving him out west, we did stop in Denver for a night, and we decided our son wanted to go hike. We like to hike. And so we went and hiked in I believe it was called the Rocky Mountain National Forest or National Park, something like that. So we get there, we pay our fees, we get in and we park, we get all of our stuff out. My husband and I have our hiking sticks. And as we're getting ready to hike, I see this big, huge sign that says something along the lines of bears are present in this area. So my nervous system definitely got activated when I saw that, and I was definitely feeling anxious. I know this ties back to an experience I had as a child when we were camping and I had learned about a bear being in the area. I didn't even see it. I just remember my dad talking about it. And for some reason, my little brain latched onto that and was really scared back then. And so now I have this fear when hiking about bears or other wild animals that my brain thinks are going to eat me. So anyway, this is where my brain's going as we're starting to hike. I'm thinking about there being a bear behind me. I'm thinking about what's going to happen if we come across a bear and how we're going to protect ourselves. And I'm thinking about my son and my husband and, of course, myself. And what we're going to do. My brain, this is what we do when we feel anxiety. We try to plan for what we're going to do if that worst case scenario happens. And oftentimes this is not helpful because maybe we can solve for it a little bit. Like I could think through, I'm going to use my walking stick, or I'm going to grab a big rock, or, I could have some kind of a plan like that. But really there's not a whole lot I can do with that, but my brain's trying to solve for it. So I noticed that this is happening with my thoughts, and I did what I would call kind of a redirect with my brain. I said to myself, Lisa, there is nothing we can do right now to solve for this. And if for some reason we encounter a bear, we'll figure out what to do. But basically, I'm just talking to my brain. I'm talking to it nicely. I'm not being mean. And I'm not saying, why are you doing this? I can't believe you're doing this. You always worry about things. You always get so anxious. I'm not talking to it like that, but I'm like, hey, I see you. I know this is a concern you have, and we're not going to be thinking about this right now. This is not something to solve for. And then I redirected my brain. I redirected it to looking around at the pretty aspen trees that are around me. I directed it to thinking about being on this trip with our son and how cool it was that we were able to take him up to school and that he wanted us to take him. I'm thinking about my business and some of the things that were coming up that I needed to plan for. I'm thinking about the people that we're going to be seeing on this trip. At one point, I started talking with my husband about his previous camping and hiking experience when he was a scout in his teenage years. And he started telling me funny stories about things he and his buddies did on these campouts and their interactions with their leaders. Oh, their poor leaders. But anyway, it definitely was distracting my brain as I was listening to these stories, and I'm asking him more questions. And you know what? It ended up being an enjoyable hike. Did my brain try to go back to the subject of bears at times during the hike? Yes, it did. And I just noticed it. And I said, we're not going to do this. And I redirected to thinking about something else. So after the hike, well, actually, let me back up. At one point during the hike, our son really wanted to get to the lake that was at the end of this hike. And we knew, my husband and I knew that we weren't going to be fast enough to make it in the time that we had. And so our son decided he's very athletic. He's like, I'm just going to run to the lake. And we're like, okay, great. We will meet you back at the car. And of course, my brain at that point is like, oh no, what if something happens to him? What if he encounters a bear and then we're not even going to know? And again, I had to redirect my brain. And, I'm like, there's other people on this trail. If there's a problem, we'll be able to know. So anyway, after we got back from the hike, I shared with my husband what was going on for me on the hike. I didn't talk about it on the hike because I didn't want to overemphasize it and like give my brain something more to worry about. I just wanted to practice what I was doing with redirecting. But when I got back, I did tell my husband about it. And of course, he just chuckles knowing this is his wife and her brain that sometimes is kind of sticky in the sense that it latches onto these thoughts that sometimes cause me anxiety. And then I thought about me having gone through that experience and how I was able to redirect my brain and actually how well it went. And I thought, you know what, Lisa, good job. Good job being able to address what was coming up for you by noticing it and then being kind to yourself and then just practice redirecting. And that really did work in calming down my nervous system. And it helped me to enjoy the hike, which I love to hike. And if I had thought about bears being around the corner the entire hike, I can promise you I would not have enjoyed that hike. I would not have enjoyed that time with my husband and with my son. So the takeaway for this, for any of you midlife moms that have what I would call kind of a sticky brain, that sometimes these thoughts come in and they activate your system, you feel anxious, they cause an increase in heart rate, shallow breathing, other types of body symptoms. If this happens for you more often, or even just sometimes, when it happens and you're noticing this is not something you can solve for, it's different if you can solve for. If you have a thought coming in about maybe a work deadline that's going to be due in 2 days and you start feeling anxious, then you can make a plan of like, hey, here's how I'm going to attack this or address this deadline. And you could map out, okay, I'm going to take this step, this step, this step, this step. Just doing that will help in reducing the anxiety because you actually can make a plan. But if it's a thought that comes up that's not a solvable one, like, oh no, what if my child gets in an accident when they're on a date tonight? Or what if my husband, gets in an accident on the way home from work? Or any of those kind of like random thoughts that pop in that can't be solved for, but they're just producing anxiety. Those are the times that you want to just notice the thoughts and then speak kindly to yourself, to your brain, like, hey, we're not going to do this. We're not going to sit here and spin about our husband getting in an accident on the way home from work. By the way, I've been guilty of that many, many times when I was a younger mom. And I didn't know this work. But being able to redirect the brain, okay, what problem can we solve for right now? Let's solve for making dinner. Let's solve for folding the laundry. Let's solve for getting this thing ready for this project we're doing on Saturday. Whatever it is, put your brain to work on solving a problem that you can solve in that moment. And try it out. See if it works. I would be curious to hear your experiences with this if you try it out. And you can email me. My email address is midlifemomcoach@gmail.com. And I'm also on Instagram if you wanted to DM me and tell me about your experience with this and trying it out. Hopefully this second recording went as well as the first one. We will never know since it is now gone somewhere in the cyberspace. So anyway, I will see you midlife moms on the podcast next week. If you're enjoying what you are learning on this podcast and would like to learn more about working with me as your coach, you can message me at midlifemomcoach@gmail.com, or you can reach out to me on Instagram. Midlife Mom Coach is my handle. We'll see you next time on the podcast.